All right, guys, thank you for joining us. Today we're going to be going over landscape lighting. Okay, we have a mantra or a motto that we're coming out with through Wintergreen, and it's light the ground they walk on. Okay, so really we're talking about not only the product, but the experience of what landscape lighting can bring to your end user or to your client. All right, a little bit about myself. Been doing this 3 or 4 years now. There's a lot of information here about Christmas and holiday on this slide, but really my passion and something that I enjoy teaching, learning about, talking about with you guys is landscape lighting. Not only the product like we're talking about, but also the design, the elements that go into an actual well-rounded install here. So some of the things we're going to cover today, from product knowledge to that complete plan, ultimately bringing out that designer inside of you. All right, so obviously we need to understand our product line, know our application and our use cases, understanding our installations and our system planning, and then we'll take some questions here at the end and give you a guide to your next steps here as an installer, whether you've been doing it for 10 years or whether you're just getting into the landscape lighting side. So number one thing, we want to instill confidence into you as the installer. Okay, being able to spec a job, sell a job, being able to do the actual install, getting all of those elements where they need to be. Okay, so we want to identify the correct fixtures. Are they pathway lights? Are they spotlights? Which spotlight do I need to use? Is it a well light or a deck light? What bulb goes with that as well? Is it fully integrated? Is it a G4? Is it an MR16? Knowing our product lines to make sure that we put on the correct display. But also making sure that we're connecting everything correctly. Okay, it's pretty simple, smooth to smooth, rib to rib when we're talking about those connections, but ultimately making sure that everything is watertight. We have some slack built into that as well in case something does happen. And ultimately making sure we've got the correct transformer for the job. But not only for the job, but making sure we're looking into the future. If our client wants to add on to this particular install, we're building in that room. We're thinking ahead for potential upsells down the line here. So we'll start off with a little question here. The property manager calls. They want some landscape lighting across the main walkway around the entrance of their building. Is that something that you're comfortable doing where you're at right now? Some of you might say yes. Some of you might say no, you don't really know where to start. Okay, how do we get to that point where you can attack this with confidence, being able to go out and quote that, make sure you're profitable, make sure everything lines up correctly so that you have a successful install. Step number one, knowing our product line. This is the fundamentals, whether we're doing holiday, landscape lighting, whatever you guys are doing, we have to know our product line. We've broken it out by 3 rules for 3 families. All right, our pathway lights, your walkway lights, everything is going to have that little G4 bulb in there. Your spotlights broken down into 2 bulbs. Okay, you've got your smaller spotlights, your Athens and your Jasper, that's going to have an MR16, slots right in there. Or your Scout, which is your big old fat spotlight. Okay, lighting up those larger trees, it's going to have a par 36. All right, and then we have a couple integrated options. Okay, where that bulb is already inside of there. There's no replacing that bulb, but that's going to be like your deck lights and your step lights. So when we're talking about lighting the walkway, right, this is really based off customer preference. Do they want something a little bit more modern? Do they want something maybe a little bit more traditional? Regardless of what they're looking for, it's just based around the hat that is actually on top of those fixtures. Okay, now all of our fixtures going to come in black finish and that antique bronze. If they want that more traditional look, that bronze is a great fit for them. If they're looking for something a little bit more modern, kind of where the industry is at right now, the black is perfect. Okay, but like we talked about, all of these fixtures going to have the same base, but also the same bulb, that G4 bulb that goes into them. Next step, when we're talking about aiming, we want to light up something, whether that's trees, bushes, signage on a house, signage on a property management company, the entrance, whatever that might be. We've got three options. Okay, you've got your Athens and your Jasper, the MR16 bulb, a little bit smaller projection coming out of those fixtures. Then you've got your big boy, the Scout. Okay, large trees, palm trees, create a nice wash on a wall. Big areas that we need to light up, that's where that par 36 bulb comes into play. And then if we want to get creative, we list the Savannah as our pathway light or our walkway light, where you're going to typically bury that, light up a pathway. We see it in parks, municipalities use them all the time, city centers, but there's a lot of creativity that we can have with a well light. So inside, you can change that angle and through a swing arm of where that bulb is projecting. Okay, so you can use that on poles and columns, light poles, flag poles, things like that, where you can get that nice wash coming up. It doesn't always have to be the traditional sense of the actual fixture. Okay, now we do have that with a gravel guard. So if it is on a walkway, on a pathway where there's rocks or debris, something that might scratch that lens, we have protection in place to make sure that those fixtures stay intact for a long time. Okay, and then the second part of these is your deck lights. Getting a nice, clean, subtle look on fences, things like that, decks, patios, where you're able to light that up efficiently, but it's not bulky, it's not overbearing, it's not going to wash out the area. Last one here, built into the wall or the stair. Okay, same thing, we can be creative with these fixtures. They don't have to just be for steps, okay, or deck lighting or hardscape lighting. Okay, traditionally these are for hardscapes, but one of the issues that guys run into, landscape companies, the mowers, the guys trimming, they're going to beat up those pathway lights in areas where we put them in grass. Okay, so being able to use like a Tupelo, putting that under the edge of concrete along a driveway can create that same kind of look, nice, clean, simple, easy to install there, but you're creating a different look using a different fixture. Okay, so the big thing about landscape lighting is we're able to be creative with our fixtures, mix and match things across. Okay, and that's just something you'll start to pick up the more jobs you do. All right, so we'll touch on the bulbs one more time. Of course, we've got the three bulb types, your G4, MR16, the par 36, and of course those integrated bulbs that we cannot change throughout our fixtures. So really, we want to make sure that that is ingrained in our head, okay? We want to make sure when we're loading up our truck, getting to the job site, similar to holiday lighting, right? We want to make sure that we have the bulbs for the job, that we have the fixtures that go with those bulbs, okay? We don't want to try to mix and match things because ultimately they're not going to fit. Okay, that's the number one rule here. We want to make sure we have the right bulbs. We won't want to take C9 bulbs with C7 stringer, right? We want to make sure everything matches up. We want to make sure we have our burial cable. We want to make sure we have our connectors and our transformer to be successful here. So it's just like memory from that point. All right, so if a client wants accent lighting on 3 ornamental trees and pathway lights along a 60-foot walkway, which fixture combination covers both applications? Okay, pathway lights and scout spotlights, pathway lights and an Athens spotlight, magnolia pathway lights and hardscape lights, step lights and spotlights. Okay, when we're going through this question, let's think about an ornamental tree, usually smaller, right? So the Scout, probably not the best option to light up a smaller tree. We're going to wash those out. Okay, so as we're looking at this, Of course, the pathway lights is what we need. And then that Athens spotlight is going to be the right fixture for those smaller trees. Get a nice solid projection there onto those trees. Nice clean look. So our answer would be B on that question. So our ultimate goal when we're looking at jobs is getting an initial spec of that job based off of pictures. When you pull up to the house, pull up to the job site, have an idea before you go talk to the client. Same thing with holiday. When we pull up, you can gauge an idea of how long this is going to take. Okay, they have a substantial tree. They've got some signage over here. What areas can we get in front of them to light this up with our landscape fixtures? All right, second part that we'll get into, application and use cases. All right, so if a client asks for something permanent, I think this is our best option. Okay, we want to keep them on the holiday side. We want that recurring revenue during the holiday season, but the landscape lighting can fill that void, give them that clean look, and personally, I think it looks a lot better than permanent lighting on the roof line. Okay, I think landscape lighting, when you're driving around, you see that nicely lit home during the summer. To me, it always catches my eye. I'm always pointing it out to people, and I think it's just that clean, traditional, classic look, seeing things lit up outside of the holiday season. All right, and then this comes down to 3 steps to do this correctly. Okay, what are the parts that we need for landscape lighting so that we can limit our callbacks, we don't have issues, and everything lights up properly? Okay, step number 1, it all starts with the bulb. It all revolves around our bulb and our fixture. Second part is our connections. Okay, not only making sure they're watertight, like we said in the beginning, making sure everything is in sequence, smooth to smooth, rib to ribbed, but also giving some slack. Okay, if somebody does bump a fixture, the landscaper bumps into it, knocks it over, we have some slack in that line so that things don't pull out. And we just have to fix that fixture. We don't have to bury or unbury that cable and go back through that line to make sure those connections are okay. Last part of it, making sure everything is set up correctly inside of the transformer. Okay, and then from that transformer, are we adding a timer? Are we using a photocell, a digital timer? What other things can we add to this to make it simple, not only for us, but also for our end user and our client here to turn on their system, make it as easy as possible for them to enjoy their lighting. Quick quote here. We want to really focus in on the dark spots. Okay, the best landscape lighting sales happen when you're already on the property. Okay, we want to be as present on the location as possible. Okay, figure out those dark spots. Figure out how we can show them what this is going to look like. Of course, always have a sample kit. Be able to show them. Do a demo with them. Okay, the best landscape lighting sales happen dusk, early evening. We want to show what this is going to look like. Bring that joy to their face, similar to Christmas. You want to show them that end look more than anything. Flip that on for them. See the joy that hits their face when they can actually see what you guys have been talking about. All right, second question here. You're installing Savannah well lights around a commercial entrance with loose gravel. What accessory would you spec for that fixture? Okay, heavy duty spotlight stake, Titan pathway stake, gravel guard, or a louver guard. Okay, if we go back to our well lights, we have our smooth finish, okay, which is just that lens, or we have the one with the gravel guard. If we have those loose impediments, we have rocks, debris, things that are going to scratch or potentially damage our fixture, we always want to make sure that we spec that out for the gravel guard. So our answer to our second question is C, that gravel guard. All right, so landscape lighting is the year-round upsell. Okay, a lot of you guys are focused on holiday. You might really love the holiday season. You might be like some guys that don't like holiday and they enjoyed the landscape side of things more. Okay, how do we add to our book of business, create more customers, get our customers that might only be doing holiday with us to do landscape? This is our opportunity to add to that book, add to our offering. And if you're already doing holiday, it's an easy transition into landscape lighting. Step number 3, install and system planning. This is where we get into the math portion of it. This is where it's a little bit different than holiday lighting. There's some additional factors we need to take into account when we're talking about landscape lighting that we don't necessarily need to with the holiday side. So there's 7 rules that we've put together to maintain system reliability. All right, step number 1, we want to make sure that our transformer is at least 12 inches off of the ground. We don't want any water getting in underneath. We don't want anything to affect our connection where our power is coming from. We want to make sure it's plugged into a GFCI. Okay, make sure we're protecting our system from the very beginning. From that transformer, we want our first fixture to be 10 feet off of that. Okay, now we're not just talking about 10 feet, from start to finish. We put our first fixture 10 feet. Okay, if we need to put a fixture 3 feet from the transformer, we just want to make sure that we have 10 feet of that burial cable in terms of space so that we don't overload the system there from the beginning. All right, and then from each additional fixture, 5 feet between those fixtures. And it's all based off of the cable, not the distance between the fixtures. You can put fixtures right next to each other. We just want to make sure we've got that slack, we've got that line between them. For our actual burial cable, we want to make sure that is 6 inches below the ground. All right, so if your homeowner's out there messing in the yard, there's not going to be any issues. It's protected from landscaping. We want to protect our system as much as we possibly can. Part number 6, we want to make sure that there is a wattage buffer for our system. Okay, and we'll get into that from your bulbs versus your transformer to making sure that if there's a surge that happens, we're protected. It's not going to affect our system. Then finally, making sure that our transformer has some kind of covering over it. Okay, we don't want to see our system just get beaten up in the weather and the elements. Okay, so making sure there is something semi-covering that in the long run is going to be best for us. All right, so this is where we get into the math side of things. We've tried to make this as simple as possible for you guys to understand and make sure that you're able to create the best system possible. Okay, so on this chart, it's broken down from your total wattage, okay, for your bulbs versus your run length. Okay, so we've got this example here. On your transformer, you'll have your COM, and then you'll have 12 volt, 13, 14, and 15 volt there. So with your voltage, okay, it's going to depend on how far we need to go. What our wattage of is for the bulbs, okay, will depend on which one we ultimately put that into, okay? It's also going to depend on which transformer we have. Is it a 150 or is it a 300? Okay, for those longer runs, and what a lot of guys do is they just go with that 300. Like we talked about at the beginning, say your client, they just want to do one side of the home, they just want to do the front, but they might add on later. They might add some things to the home or to the project. Go ahead and get them set up with that 300. There's not a big cost difference between the two, but you're already set up for that. You don't have to put in the 150 and then go back and change it out. You've already built in that barrier or that extra wattage for you to just tap right into. All right, so if we're talking about 15 fixtures here, and they're all 5 watts a piece, that'll put us at 75 total watts. Okay, we build in that buffer. We're still well within that 150 watts on that ultimate transformer. But if they do want to add to that, they want to increase the size, just go with the 300. It'll make your job a lot easier. It'll give you more power, because once we start running into that buffer range, getting closer to that 20%, or if we exceed that, or we exceed our run length, that's where you have dimmer fixtures at the end. You may not be getting power to all of your fixtures. What are some of those things that we can limit off the bat by just getting set up correctly from the beginning? So same kind of thing here, okay? Breaking down that math, how to size the system, okay? This is broken down 8 pathways plus 4 spotlights on a 75-foot run, okay? So you can see with your math, you've got your wattage, some basic addition, multiplication here at the beginning, factoring in that buffer. Okay, we always want to make sure we got that 20% buffer, and then basing that off of the transformer. Okay, we don't want to select our transformer first before we know what the job entails in terms of wattage. And then we want to make sure we're using the right cable gauge. Is this the right wire or burial cable to carry that wattage and light all of our fixtures? All right, and then the last piece of it, confirm the layout. Making sure our fixtures are in line, we keep those rules together. Okay, we've got that 10 feet of burial cable, we've got 5 feet between the fixtures, and this is where our clients want those to go. All right, from stake to transformer, step by step. It all starts with the fixture, and we're going to keep hammering away at the fixture and the bulb, making sure that is correct. Step number 1. Then we're going to tie those in to our burial cable, making sure that is watertight, those connections are solid, like we've harped on, smooth to smooth, rib to ribbed, not only from your fixture, but into your burial cable and into the transformer, okay? And then like we talked about with the transformer, 1 wire into the comm, 1 wire into our 12, 13, 14, or 15 volt, okay? And then we can add in that timer and plug everything in from there. So really when we're talking about the fixtures and our stakes and making sure that this is a well-rounded, watertight display, we need to use the right materials, okay? This picture on the left here is an example actually from one of our sales reps of some fixtures she has in her yard, but we can see that there is water getting down inside of that. That is the last thing we want with the system. Okay, we don't want to make it easy for water or any obstructions to affect our system. Okay, she's also dealing with a lot of heaving. Okay, her fixture is falling over. That's the last thing you want as an installer, having to go back to a job that you sold as permanent, but you're out there every spring and winter having to go out there and fix it. Okay, so with our fixtures especially, everything is watertight. It's all an integrated system when we put it together, and there's not those openings within the fixture to the actual stake. So really, when we're talking about our fixtures, making sure that we're using the right transformer and making sure that we factor in that buffer. Most important piece of planning, factoring in that buffer. The last thing we want are dim lights or lights that are not lighting properly at the end of a run, okay? The biggest thing guys forget is that buffer, not factoring in enough room and not using the right transformer. Okay, that's the difference between a happy client and you being upset that you have to keep going out to this job. Next question here, you're planning a system with 15 G4 pathway lights, 2 watts each. What's the minimum transformer wattage, including the 20% buffer? All right, so if we get our calculators out, we take that 15 times 2, that'll put us at 30 total watts, okay? So answer number 1, 30 watts. B is 36 watts. C, 150, or D, 300. All right, so going back to what we just talked about, if we don't include that buffer, we might say A is the right answer. Okay, but we need to always include that buffer. Take that extra second to add that in. That'll give us with B 36 watts for that install. All right, so just to harp on this again, reliability comes down to 3 numbers. Our 20% buffer, the right cable gauge on that burial cable, and our proper fixture spacing. Okay, making sure that everything is correct from the beginning will save us a ton of time and ultimately money in the long run here. All right, to wrap things up, 3 things to carry into the field. Our line from Wintergreen can cover every application. Okay, it also allows you to be creative. Okay, this is really where you get to find that holiday designer, that you take to your clients in the winter. Bring that to the field. How can I light this tree? How can I light this house that's different, but that also meets that need? Being able to use this as an upsell to your current clients. Being able to increase, keep your guys busy. If you're having issues with your guys not being busy outside of the holiday season, or you want to keep some guys around, add landscape lighting. Create that as an upsell. Market yourself as that year-round lighting expert. And last part of it, knowing your numbers of everything. Okay, making sure that you're successful, maximizing your time on the jobs, not losing money, and limiting those callbacks. At the end here, we have a cheat sheet. Like we've been talking about, everything goes back to our bulbs and our fixtures. Making sure that when we're getting our trucks ready, getting our jobs ready, we have everything ordered, ready to go out the door, making our guys successful from the start so they're not calling you on the job, asking for more bulbs, asking for more fixtures. Here's an easy way to do that. And ultimately being able to turn this session into your first job. If you're just getting started, it's a lot easier than you think it's going to be. There's a lot of tips and tricks that we can help you on. It all starts with being on the property. Okay, we need to be on the property. We need to see those dark spots. We need to help our client create that ultimate vision that they want. Okay, being able to memorize what goes into building a reliable system. Okay, our bulbs. We all know our C7s and our C9s like the back of our hand for holiday. But we need to get to that point with landscape lighting. What fixtures go where? What wire, what transformer do I want to use? Okay, and then ultimately, being able to understand what goes into the system. Being able to map out a good system. Okay, start practicing those things, going over it with your guys so that you can make the most money possible.